Hey guys, Jack here and welcome to my how to build a living room gaming PC or how to build your own Steambox video. The inspiration behind this project was the rumours we've had of Valve's apparent Steambox console that is said to be released in summer of 2013 sometime. The idea would be to build a small form factor gaming PC that would fit in your living room, maybe behind your TV or in a cabinet somewhere, that you could also run modern PC games at 720p and 1080p resolutions and decent frame rates. I would aim to spend less than £300 as this is the average launch price of a console in the UK and a rough estimate as to what the console from Valve might release at in the UK. One of the other reasons I'm making this video is to dispel the long-standing misconception that you need to spend £600 to £1,000 to get your hands on a decent gaming PC. This simply isn't the case anymore. You can pick up some amazing components for relatively cheap that will do exactly what you need them to. It also serves a purpose to demonstrate that building a PC is actually quite easy. A lot of folks I speak to seem to think it's the equivalent of rocket science when, in reality, it's more like putting Lego Technic together. Whilst the motherboard might look complicated and there seem to be a gazillion wires coming from a power supply, there are only a few parts you actually have to worry about. Now, all of the components in this video were obtained from public online retailers that anyone can use. If you can do it for yourself, why spend more money getting someone to build it for you and have it shipped to yourself? It only took me 25 minutes to put this PC together, so it isn't even that time consuming. More importantly, if you do this for yourself, you can save yourself a lot of money, learn something new, and feel a great sense of accomplishment when you hit that power button for the first time and your PC powers up. So what components have I picked for this gaming PC? Well, I needed to have the best price for performance ratio to ensure I could get the most out of the £300 limit I set for myself. I've got a lot of experience with building PCs and knowing how much performance a certain component is going to get you compared to its competitors, and this allowed me to pick the best possible parts for this build. There are 8 key components to a functioning gaming PC: the case, the motherboard, the processor, memory, hard drive, graphics card, DVD drive and the power supply. The case, or chassis as some people call it, is an important choice here because it would dictate the whole size of the PC and also the form factor of the components inside. Now you can pick up home theatre cases which are really small and more comparable to the size of an Xbox or a PS3, but they're also quite expensive and generally only fit mini ITX motherboards, which are also expensive and pretty much out of my reach for my price limit. I decided instead to opt for a micro ATX case known as the Fractal Design Core 1000. A sleek looking case that's small in gaming PC terms but big enough to fit all of my components, and most importantly big enough to accommodate the graphics card, which is a vital part of our system. It's small enough to go behind or next to your TV, and it could also fit inside a cabinet and be turned on its side if you wished it to. As a plus, it comes with a pre-installed 120mm fan at the front of the case to increase airflow and help with cooling. For the CPU, I went with the Intel Pentium G8550 Sandy Bridge dual-core processor clocked at 2.9 GHz. Incredible bang for buck, and this little baby will do a great job of handling any games and applications you throw at it. The motherboard is an MSI H61M-P31 micro ATX board, a cheap board that's got enough features and expansion slots to suit our needs. 4GB of Corsair 1333MHz DDR3 memory will be just fine for the system. The majority of games don't use any more than 4GB whilst you're playing them, so this will be plenty for us. The graphics card is an XFX branded AMD HD7770 and the most expensive component in our system, but arguably the most important in terms of gaming. This little beauty is a DirectX 11 card, exceedingly good value for money, and it will run some games in 1080p resolutions at playable frame rates. It also has a HDMI connection on the back, meaning we can plug it straight into our TV and that will carry both the video and the sound. The DVD rewriter drive is a standard fare LiteOn 24X model that's cheap, cheerful and reliable. For the hard drive, I went with a 500GB Seagate 7200 RPM drive that will boot up your operating system quickly and help your games load faster. The final component is the power supply, and for this I went with a Storm 500 watt model. This has all the standard connections you expect, and it also has a 6-pin PCI Express adapter for the graphics card that we need. 500 watts will be plenty for our system, as it won't be consuming that much power whilst we're gaming. Just a quick note on the power supply before we move on, and that's that it's always good to buy as good a model as you can afford with power supplies. If you can spend a bit more, you should be looking at brands like Corsair, Silverstone and Antec. You should never skimp on the power supply, as it's the workhorse behind your PC, and if it dies you won't be able to use your PC until you replace it, and it could also potentially damage other components in your system if it causes a power surge. I went for a cheap branded power supply here to fit with my limited budget. However, if I were going to spend like 15 quid more, I'd probably have gone for the Corsair CX430 watt model. Not to say that the Storm power supply I've picked is bad, it's just that if you spend a bit more, sometimes you can get a more reliable component. In total, these components cost me £293. That is including VAT and delivery. I bought all of these components from scan.co.uk and got free delivery with them. There are other websites you can pick in the UK, such as eBuyer, Overclockers and Aria. If you're in the US, I've been told that newegg.com is a great place to source computer components. You should also note that I've not included a copy of Windows 7 64-bit in the price of this system, as I already have it. Although there are other ways to obtain copies of Windows 7 64-bit for free, I'd always recommend buying a genuine copy. You can pick Windows 7 64-bit up online for around £60 to £70. I also know that some schools and universities give out copies for free depending on what courses you're attending, so it may be worth asking if that's the case with you. Right, with that out of the way, let's get on to the build and get stuck in. First off, you're going to need a couple of tools. Primarily a flat surface to work, a Phillips head screwdriver, a pair of scissors and some cable ties. Whilst cable ties aren't necessary, tidying up your wires at the end of a PC build can make it easier to manage, prettier to look at, and it can also increase airflow throughout the case. The first thing you want to do is take all the components out of their boxes and clear as much space as possible. Ideally, you want to be building on a wooden or plastic surface. Now before I start, please note there are other ways and other orders to build a PC. What I'm about to tell you is just the way that I like doing things, so take it with a pinch of salt. You can copy the way I do it, but if you want to look up online, there are other ways of doing things. I like to start off by preparing the motherboard, as it can be hard to work with once it's inside the case. The first thing you want to do is remove the cap that's covering the CPU socket. That's the black thing there, and it should just pop off really easily. Once that's removed, you'll see a load of pins on the motherboard beneath it, and be careful not to touch these as they bend and break very easily. The next step is to open the socket up so you can insert the processor. To open the socket, you simply push down on that little metal clamp, slide it out and pull it backwards. Easy as that. Now at this point, I'd recommend placing the motherboard on top of another box so you've got a hard surface beneath you that won't matter if it gets scratched or damaged. In this instance, the motherboard box works perfect for that. The next step is to insert the CPU. Now there's only one way this is going to fit into the socket, so it's pretty hard to mess this up. Just look where the two notches are and match it up to the motherboard and then pop the CPU in. Boom, simple as that. When the CPU's in, you have to put the socket back down and slide that clamp back into its original position. It does require a bit of force, don't worry, you won't break it, just push it down and slide it under so it locks the processor in place. Next up is the heatsink fan that came with the CPU. This has already got thermal paste on the underside, so you won't need to worry about that, and installing this thing couldn't be more simpler. You just line the 4 holes up and push down on the push pins. Notice how I do the diagonals first, it makes it easier this way. Now you'll hear a distinct clicking sound when each of the pins are correctly installed, and it's always good to check if it's secure by pulling on it a little when you're done. Once you're sure the heatsink is properly attached, make sure you plug in the fan. This goes into the connector labelled CPU fan and is usually located at the top of the motherboard. Next up, we have to install the memory. Notice how one side of the memory module is shorter than the other, and notice how this is also the same on the memory slots on the motherboard. Once again, there's only one way this will fit in, so you can't mess it up. Just push the clamps back at the top and the bottom of the memory slots and gently push the memory module into it. Once you've got the memory module in place, move the clamps back into position to secure it. Now the motherboard's prepared, put it aside and bring in the case, power supply, hard drive and DVD drive onto your working surface, as we're going to be working with these next. The first thing to do with the case is to get the side panels off. These are held in by 2 thumb screws on either side, so remove these, slide the panel back and put them out of the way. In most PC cases, you'll also find a box which may contain things like screws and cable ties for installation. Installing the DVD drive is very simple, but first we're going to have to pop the front of the case off too. The easiest way to do this is to grab it at the bottom and pull outwards, and it should just come off. Make sure the DVD drive is the right way up and slide that bad boy in there. You want to make sure that the holes in the DVD drive match up with the holes in the case so you can screw the thing in there. Match them up and use 4 flat screws to secure the drive in place. You probably also noticed that there was a grill in the way at the front of the case. All you have to do to remove that is push the clips back a little and it'll pop out. There are no screws holding it in place, nice and easy. Once you've removed that grill, clip the front back on, making sure that you haven't trapped any wires, and we can move on to installing the hard drive. Now in this case, because of the design, the hard drive attaches to the side of the case via 4 screws. Match these 4 holes up on the hard drive with the 4 holes in the case and screw the hard drive in, ensuring that the SATA power and SATA cable connectors are facing into the case so we can plug them in when that time comes around. Easy as pie. The power supply is next on the list, and all it takes is 4 thumb screws in the back to secure it in place. Slide it into the case at the top and make sure that the fan is facing down into the case, and then screw it in. It also helps to move the wires out of the case temporarily. This will make it easier to install the motherboard, which is next on the list. Before we install the motherboard into the case, there are a couple of things we need to do. The first is to clip the in-out plate or the I/O plate that came with the motherboard. This is basically a little shield with spaces for your connections like a USB and your speakers. Make sure you've got it in the right position and stick it in the back of the case. The audio jacks normally go at the bottom. Once that's in place, it's time to screw the gold motherboard standoffs into the case. These separate the motherboard from the case and act as screw holders to lock the motherboard in. If you look inside the case, you'll see the holes where the standoff should go. You'll also notice that there are quite a lot of them. You'll only need to use however many mounting holes you have on your motherboard. If you look, we've got 6 holes located here, so we only need to use 6 standoffs. If you aren't sure where exactly these go, a good tip is to put the motherboard in the case so you can see exactly the places where it's going to be screwed in. Screw these all in and make sure they're tight so you can move on to the next step. Now before we screw the motherboard in, we're going to connect the front panel connectors. You can do this after you've screwed the board in if you like, but sometimes you've got more light and room to do it outside the case. It just makes the whole process a little easier. So this little bundle of wires here are the front panel connectors, and these are things like the power button, the audio jacks and the USB ports on the front of your case. So they're pretty pivotal to the operation of your system. Here we have USB, HD audio, reset, power, HDD LED, power LED and system fan. Now some motherboards have where these plug in actually printed on the motherboard themselves, but if you don't, you can always refer to the manual to see where they go. The little ones here plug into the JFP1 connector on the motherboard. All you got to do is look at the diagram and match them up. Easy. As for the front USB ports, we can plug that cable into either USB 1 or USB 2. That doesn't really matter on this motherboard. Don't forget the HD front panel audio connector, and that goes into the audio connector on the motherboard. Are you noticing a trend here? Finally, the 120mm fan at the front of the case simply goes in one of the SYS fan connectors on the right of the motherboard. With everything in place, we can now put the motherboard into the case. Line it up and screw it in. Make sure you've got clear access to the I/O ports on the back of the case and begin screwing the board in. Now at this point, I'd advise doing some basic cable management. Simply group together some wires that are in similar positions and tie them up with a cable tie. It will make the next step easier. Next, we have to connect the appropriate power cables coming from the power supply into the motherboard to give our PC some juice. The important ones are the 24-pin and 4-pin power cables for the motherboard. The big 24-pin cable goes in the right hand side of the board, and the 4 or 8-pin connector goes in the top here. Some more powerful motherboards with lots of features have an 8-pin connector rather than a 4-pin connector, but in our case we only need the 4 pins. Next up is the SATA power for the hard drive and DVD drive. These are the cables with the little L-shaped or tick connections. Have a quick look at the ends to make sure you've got them the right way up, and then go ahead and plug them into the hard drive and the DVD drive. So now we've got power for our hard drive and DVD drive, but we also need a way for them to talk to the motherboard, and this is achieved with SATA cables. These are the red cables that came in our motherboard box. Sometimes you might get black ones or white ones, but they're all pretty much the same. Plug one end into the DVD drive and the other end into one of the 4 SATA ports at the bottom right of the motherboard. Now do the same with the hard drive. We're almost finished with our PC build apart from a couple more things. The last component we need to install is the graphics card. First off, look where the PCI Express slot is on your motherboard and work out which of the white plates you have to remove from the back, because they will be blocking your graphics card. Unscrew the two that matter and get hold of your graphics card. Notice here as well that I had to move my two red SATA cables to the bottom ports because they were blocking the graphics card from fitting in. I decided to keep this in the video because it may be a situation you come across too. Installing the graphics card is easy peasy, you just line it up in the slot and push it downwards, simple as that. You can secure it with the provided thumb screws or use some other screws of your own. Don't forget that the graphics card also needs power. For that, we take the 6-pin PCI Express power adapter from the power supply and plug it into the card on the side. And there you have it, your PC is now ready for Windows installation and will soon become a gaming beast. Finish off with some basic cable management with the zip ties. You don't have to go super try hard tidy mode with it, just make sure it's clean and the case has good airflow. If we had a different case with more cable management options and like a modular power supply, we could have made it look super pretty. But as we're on a limited budget, I think we did a pretty good job here with the cable management. Now we get to turn the PC on for the first time and install Windows. This is actually really easy to do. Most modern motherboards will realise you've put a Windows DVD in there, so all you got to do is boot the system up with the Windows disk in the drive and it should load the setup. If it doesn't load the setup and gives you a no boot device message, you'll have to go into the BIOS and change something. To get into the BIOS menu, you have to press delete on your keyboard as the PC is booting. Once in the BIOS, go along the top to the boot menu. You can navigate with the arrow keys on your keyboard. In the boot menu, you need to set your first boot option to your CD/DVD drive. Once you've done that, you can then either press F10 on your keyboard to save and exit, or just go along the top until you see the save and exit option. The Windows installation setup is very easy to use. You just select your hard drive and click install. Simple. Once Windows is installed, you'll then have to go ahead and install the drivers from the DVD. Now, I'm not going to explain how to do this in the interest of time, but trust me, it's very simple, and as Intel once said, even your grandma could do it. So what about games and how do they perform on this thing? That's probably one of the reasons you came to see this video. You wanted to see the sort of performance you could get out of a £300 gaming PC. Well, I'm happy to say that I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at how this system performs even at 1080p resolutions. Here I've got the PC plugged into the TV via HDMI from the graphics card. The video is displayed on the screen and the sound comes out of the TV speakers. Nice and easy, and it works flawlessly. There's literally no setup required. Now, I've actually recorded the TV with a camera rather than recording with a software capture program like Fraps or DxTory, because that would affect the frame rate and wouldn't give us a true indication of the PC's performance. What you're seeing here is a program called MSI Afterburner displaying the frame rate in real time in pink on the top left of the screen. Now, I decided to test 5 games in total, each running at 1920 by 1080 resolution. Remember as well that this is native 1080p, so the picture looks very sharp on a 50-inch TV. The majority of Xbox 360 and PS3 games do not run natively in 1080p resolution. Instead, they're upscaled. Black Ops 2, for example, runs natively at 880 by 720 at 60 FPS on the PS3 and the Xbox, and it's then upscaled to 720 or 1080p resolutions. There's a similar story with Battlefield 3 on the consoles too, which runs at 1280 by 704 at 30 FPS. Again, that's upscaled, but the problem is this upscaling the consoles do lead to blurriness and softening of edges, and the game doesn't look as sharp. My apologies for the weird looking colours on the TV here. It's actually quite hard to film a TV screen and make it look good, but the important thing is to pay attention to the frame rate in the top left hand corner of the screen. Also, take into account that not everyone has a 1080p monitor or TV, so if your monitor supports a lower resolution, that's great for you because the games are going to run even better on your system. Generally speaking, with gaming PCs, the lower the resolution, the more frame rate you're going to get. From a 2012 study, the most popular monitor resolution was 1366 by 768, and if you're running a monitor with a resolution like that, this PC will absolutely beast through your games. You don't have to run at native resolution with PC games either. You can always drop the resolution down if you want to, but bear in mind the picture won't be as sharp. I thought I'd start with Battlefield 3, seeing as that's the most demanding PC game I've selected out of the 5 games I'm going to showcase. Here we've got the game running at 1080p on low settings. I'm playing on a 26 player team deathmatch server, and you can see that the game is very smooth and running at an average of around 50 to 60 FPS, which is more than playable. Even when there's a lot of stuff going on the screen like grenades exploding or multiple players, the frames per second stays solid and allows for a great gaming experience. It's worth noting that some of the BF3 maps run worse than others. Your FPS would probably be lower on some of the Back to Karkand or Aftermath maps, for example, but you won't be seeing your FPS drop below 30 to 40 on this system. Moving on now to Black Ops 2, and you can see I'm running this in 1080p on high settings. I've even got FX anti-aliasing enabled, so the game looks really sweet. Keep an eye on the frame counter and you can see that even on high settings the game is averaging around 60 FPS, which is great for a fast-paced shooter like this. With this PC you can get Black Ops 2 native 1080p, which looks amazing on a big screen, plus the smoothness of 60 FPS. I could definitely have a lot of fun playing Blops 2 on this setup. You could even plug in an Xbox 360 controller into the PC if you wanted to, and lay back on the couch for a gaming session. Next up we've got Counter-Strike Global Offensive. Counter-Strike is the daddy of PC shooters, and if you want to get into FPS games on the PC you've got to check out CSGO. Now this is the latest version of Counter-Strike and it was released in August 2012. It's a gorgeous looking game, and as you can see running on high settings apart from shadow quality, again at 1080p with FXAA enabled. Now as CSGO runs on the Source engine, it's a very well optimized game, and we're averaging over 100 FPS here, which is great. This also means that other Source games such as Portal 2, Team Fortress 2 and Left 4 Dead 2 will run fantastic on this system. However, if you're serious about playing CSGO competitively, you'd probably turn all the settings down to low to get the easiest vision and highest frame rate possible. And with this PC, if you do that, you're going to be averaging about 300 frames per second, which is absolutely awesome. Next up is Dota 2, which is also a Source game but looks gorgeous with high detail settings as we can see here. Dota 2 is currently in beta but will be released as a free-to-play game, and as you can see it runs great on this PC. We're averaging around 70 FPS, which with this tile is plenty even in hectic situations. Finally, we've got some DayZ, a game that's made a lot of people want to switch to PC gaming and definitely one of my favourite games of 2012. As it stands, DayZ is a mod for the Arma 2 game and it's not very well optimised at all. This means that even some people with very expensive gaming PCs can't run it on high graphics. However, there is a standalone version of DayZ in the works, and the alpha of that game should be released very soon in the new year. The reason I'm telling you this is that the creator of the game, Dean Hall, has said that his development team are making a lot of changes and optimizations to the game engine to ensure that when it does release, it's going to run way better than it does at the moment. So even though you might have bad performance on the mod version of the game, when the standalone's released, the performance is going to be way better. Here we can see DayZ running at 1080p and on low settings. Now I decided to show you guys the worst case scenario. I'm running through one of the big cities in the game here called Chernogorsk, and this is infamous for giving you bad frame rates. As you can see we're averaging around 30 FPS I would say, which is still pretty playable. Now what's good about this is that in the large open forest areas and villages this PC averages around 60 FPS, which is very smooth and delightful to play. So even a badly optimised mod is playable at 1080p on this PC, which is fantastic considering we only spent £300 on it. And there we have it guys. That is the sort of performance you can get from a £300 gaming PC you can fit in your living room and plug directly into your TV if you so wish to. If you've never tried PC gaming because you've heard lots of rumours about how expensive it is or how hard it is to build a PC, hopefully this video has changed your mind about those things and given you a different perspective of the situation. The 5 games that I showcased are probably some of the more demanding PC games available at the moment, especially BF3 and DayZ, but don't forget about all the other wonderful games you can get on PC that I haven't shown. You can pick up PC games for very affordable prices nowadays thanks to digital delivery software like Steam. Steam frequently has sales and deals on that will net you literally tens of games for the price of one. As of today, the 28th of December 2012, there's a deal on Steam called the THQ bundle. This costs £20 and includes 22 THQ titles on PC. These include Darksiders 2, Metro 2033, Company of Heroes, Saints Row the Third and Space Marine. You could also pick up the Valve Complete Collection for £25, which would run extremely well on this gaming PC even on high graphics. The Valve Complete Collection has some of the best games ever in it for nearly half the price of a new Xbox 360 or PS3 game. Steam also has lots of great indie titles on there for super cheap, such as Faster Than Light, Natural Selection 2, Torchlight 2 and Gary's Mod. You also can't forget about the brilliant free-to-play library that the PC has. Massive games such as League of Legends, Team Fortress 2, Tribes Ascend, PlanetSide 2, Dota 2 and Blacklight Retribution are just a few examples. Valve have also recently implemented the Big Picture mode for Steam, which is basically a TV interface designed specially for people who like to game on their PC in the lounge with a controller. This works great for couch PC gaming and is probably going to look very similar to the interface we end up seeing on the Steambox console when it's released. So basically what I'm trying to say is that you can get hours of gaming enjoyment on PC for cheaper than you expect and in some cases completely free. All you got to worry about is paying your internet connection and your electricity bill. And by the way, the system I put together here only consumes around 200 watts when on full load. The first time I built a PC, I was scared as hell. I was scared I'd break something, afraid I'd plug the power supply in and it would frazzle all the components, but that was all in my head. Building PCs is a piece of cake and anyone can do it. With all the information and video tutorials we have online, there's no excuse not to try it out for yourself. You save some money and reap the rewards of PC gaming. Thanks for watching guys, please give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video and share it with your friends or anyone you know that's stuck and needs some help. You can always come back here for reference, or if you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to ask in the comments section below. Cheers guys, and I'll see you in the next one.